Rock music didn't just give us great songs, it gave us shocking scandals. Some stopped the world cold, some we didn't figure out until decades later. So, today, let's revisit the behind-the-scene moments everyone couldn't stop talking about. The Mamas and the Papas, the Phillips scandal.
Oh, Monday, Monday, how could you leave and not take me?
Whenever those lush, sun-soaked vocal harmonies hit your ears, there was no mistaking the legendary sound of the Mamas and the Papas, the group that basically defined the 1960s Laurel Canyon scene. Back in the mid-60s, they were the ultimate symbols of the flower power movement, standing on stage in fringe and floral prints while selling a dream of perfect harmony to the summer of love generation. And to anyone watching from the outside, they look like the happiest, most bohemian family in rock and roll history. But the reality inside the bandleader's home was a total nightmare. Some years later, the world was stunned and horrified when Mackenzie Phillips, the daughter of the bandleader John Phillips, released her memoir, High on Arrival, because Mackenzie pulled back the curtain on a secret that had been hidden for decades, revealing a deeply troubling and illegal long-term relationship with her dad. It was a massive shock that completely reframed the band's legacy. And honestly, the news broke so many hearts of fans everywhere. And hearts broke for Mackenzie, proving that the brightest sunshine pop often hid the darkest shadows behind the scenes. Van Halen, the brown M&M claws. In the early 1980s, Van Halen stood as the preeminent force in American arena rock, known globally for Eddie Van Halen's revolutionary guitar techniques and the flamboyant showmanship of David Lee Roth. The band transformed the concert experience into a high-octane technical marvel. However, a specific detail in their lengthy contract rider, the demand for a bowl of M&Ms with all the brown candies removed, well, it became a legendary symbol of perceived rockstar excess. While highlighting their diva behavior in the media. While the public viewed this as a frivolous demand, the kind that makes you roll your eyes and grumble, rich people. It was actually a clever, important engineering safety check, because Van Halen traveled with an unprecedented amount of heavy lighting and sound equipment. The structural integrity of the stage was a matter of life and death. And so, the brown M&M claws was actually a test. If the band found a brown candy backstage, they knew the venue management hadn't read the technical safety specifications of the contract. Once a frivolous demand, and now it's a brilliant, albeit eccentric, way to identify potential safety hazards before the show began. On the outside, it's the pinnacle of stardom diva drama, but behind the scenes, it was a genius safety measure. Black Sabbath, the Ozzy Bat incident. Even if you aren't a metalhead, you definitely know Ozzy Osborne as the Prince of Darkness, or the lovable, chaotic dad from early 2000s reality TV. But back in, I want to say 82, Ozzy was at the height of his solo career, and his concerts were famous for being unpredictable, wild, unpredictable, and loud. Did I mention unpredictable? The atmosphere in heavy metal back then was all about pushing boundaries and shocking the polite society of the early 80s. During a show in Des Moines, Iowa, a fan threw what Ozzy thought was a rubber toy onto the stage. He picked it up and bit the head off, only to realize mid-bite it was a real live bat. The show came to a screeching halt as he was rushed to the hospital for a series of painful rabies shots. And of course that story made global headlines. Heck, we're still talking about it today. It drew massive criticism from animal rights groups and permanently cemented his reputation as the wildest man in rock history. Fleetwood Mac, the rumors inter-band implosion. The 1977 release of Fleetwood Mac's Rumours, it remains a monumental achievement in music history, defined by its polished production and the undeniable chemistry of its 5 members. At the time, Fleetwood Mac was the most successful band in the world, embodying the sophisticated soft rock aesthetic of the late 1970s. And yet, the recording process for this masterpiece was a beautiful, messy portrait of interpersonal drama, as the band's internal structure was effectively collapsing. During the sessions, both of the band's primary couples were in the midst of bitter breakups, while the 5th member, Mick Fleetwood, was dealing with his own domestic crisis. Remarkably though, the members channeled their mutual resentment and heartbreak directly into the songwriting. They spent months in the studio, forcing one another to sing harmonies on songs that were written explicitly about their own betrayals and failures. This high-stakes emotional warfare resulted in one of the best-selling albums of all time, fueled by genuine documented friction. The Eagles, The Long Night at the Wrong Beach.
Welcome to the Hotel California.
By 1980, the Eagles were the absolute kings of that sun-drenched California cool sound that seemed to be playing out of every car window and beach house in America. Behind those breezy melodies, however, the guys were absolutely sick of each other. The pressure of being the biggest band in the world had turned their friendship into a powder keg, and everything finally blew up during a political fundraiser in Long Beach, California. The tension was so thick, you could feel it in the front row. Microphones on stage actually caught guitarist Glenn Frey and Don Felder trading insults and threats between every single song.
We are all just prisoners here of our own device.
At one point, get this, Frey was heard telling Felder there were only 3 more songs until he was going to settle their score physically backstage. Well, the band broke up essentially the second they walked off the stage that night, and it took a staggering 14 years before they would even consider playing together again. Aerosmith, the Toxic Twins, and the Police Station Stash.
A dream is how the dream come true.
During the mid-1970s, Aerosmith ascended to the top of the American hard rock hierarchy, characterized by Steven Tyler's acrobatic vocals and Joe Perry's gritty guitar work. Their reputation for relentless touring and high-energy performances was matched only by their notoriety for extreme substance abuse. This era was defined by a culture of total defiance toward authority and traditional legal boundaries.
I still miss you, babe. Don't wanna miss you, babe.
One of the most surreal documented incidents occurred when the band was detained at a police station after an officer found a seed of the green sticky stuff in their van. Now, while handcuffed, Tyler managed to discard 2 larger bags of illegal substances into a dark adjacent room, watching as officers unknowingly walked past the stash during the fingerprinting process.
Sing with it, sing for the earth, sing for life, sing for the...
Yeah, that's pretty awesome though. What is more troubling, however, was their reign was marked by an upsetting and highly controversial legal maneuver, where Tyler obtained legal guardianship of a 16-year-old Julia Holcomb. This arrangement was specifically designed to allow the minor to travel across state lines with the band without Tyler facing prosecution under interstate travel laws. So yeah, one clever stash and one gross maneuver. Kiss, shock imagery, and the SS logo. You can't miss Kiss. They're the guys in the iconic face paint, platform boots, and silver armor who've been breathing fire and spitting blood on stage for decades. In the 70s, they were every parent's worst nightmare. On top of being a band unlike anything we've seen before, they were a massive marketing machine that used shock imagery to provoke as much outrage as possible. And then they ran into some serious legal trouble when they tried to take their show to West Germany, because their logo, which featured 2 lightning bolt-esque characters, looked a little too much like the insignia used by the old losers from World War II. You know what I mean, right? Because Germany has very strict laws against using symbols that resemble that era. The band was actually forced to change their logo specifically for that country. It was a rare moment where their shock rock branding hit a legal wall they couldn't climb over with their tall gothic rock star boots. Led Zeppelin, the Mud Shark Incident.
Kansas on a big jet plane. Never let them tell you that we're all the same.
In the late 60s and early 70s, Led Zeppelin redefined the scale of rock and roll stardom, breaking attendance records and traveling in a private jet. They were some of the architects of heavy metal, but they were also the subjects of some of the most enduring and notorious legends of backstage debauchery. And central to this lore is the Mud Shark Incident, which took place at the Edgewater Inn in Seattle, a hotel famously known for allowing guests to fish directly from their windows.
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed, man.
While the specifics of the story have been debated and embellished over the decades, the core of the incident was confirmed by the band's own road manager, Richard Cole, as well as various biographers. The event involved members of the band's entourage and a caught fish in a highly controversial and gross-out hotel room encounter. The story became a foundational piece of rock history, serving as a stark example of the extreme and often problematic behavior that was tolerated at the height of the 1970s rock era. Guns N' Roses, the Riverport Riot, and Rocket Queen. By the time the 90s rolled around, Guns N' Roses was the most dangerous band in the world, and they lived up to that name every single dang night. Axl Rose was famous for his short fuse and for showing up to stage hours late. The fans in 1991 were all used to a bit of chaos, but nobody expected what happened at the Riverport Amphitheater in St. Louis. Mid-show, Axl spotted a fan with a camera, and when security didn't take it away, he literally dove off the stage and tackled the guy himself. He then climbed back up, told the crowd he was going home, and then walked off. The resulting riot was massive. Fans tore up the venue, destroyed the band's equipment, and dozens of people were injured. It resulted in a lifetime ban from the city and multiple lawsuits, proving that the band's dangerous reputation wasn't just a marketing gimmick. Twisted Sister and the PMRC, the Filthy 15. The mid-1980s saw a significant cultural clash between the burgeoning heavy metal scene and political organizations concerned with traditional values. The Parents Music Resource Center, usually shortened to PMRC, led by infamous Tipper Gore, sought to implement a rating system for music based on lyrical content. They identified a list of songs known as the Filthy 15, which they claimed were detrimental to the youth of America, leading to high-profile U.S. Senate hearings. The standout moment of these hearings was the testimony of Dee Snider, the lead singer of Twisted Sister. Arriving in a signature stage attire, Snider delivered a remarkably articulate and poised defense of his work.
To be perfectly honest, 9 years from now, I'm going to be well retired.
He effectively demonstrated that the committee had misinterpreted his lyrics, turning the moral panic of the era on its head. Although the hearings ultimately led to the creation of the parental advisory sticker, Snider's performance remains a landmark moment of the defense of creative expression in the music biz. Deep Purple, the California Jam Explosion. You probably know Deep Purple from that riff that every single person learns when they first pick up a guitar. Smoke on the Water. And back in 1974, they were one of the loudest, heaviest bands on the planet. And they were headlining the California Jam Festival in front of 250,000 people. And it was also being broadcast on national TV. Well, guitarist Ritchie Blackmore was already in a bad mood because of the cameras, and he decided to give the crew a finale they would never forget. Blackmore started by smashing his guitar directly into a TV camera lens. But that was just the warm-up. He had his roadie set off firebombs inside his amplifiers, but the explosion was way bigger than anyone planned. It blew a hole in the stage, set Blackmore's hair on fire, and sent shockwaves through the entire festival grounds. The band had to make a run for it in a helicopter just to avoid being arrested by the local authorities for the sheer scale of the destruction. The Doors, The Miami Incident. As the 1960s drew to a close, the Doors were at the forefront of the psychedelic rock movement, led by the enigmatic and often volatile Jim Morrison. By around 1969, Morrison's performances had become increasingly erratic, fueled by his rejection of his teen idol status. This tension reached a breaking point during a performance at the Dinner Key Auditorium in Miami, an event that would lead to a significant legal battle. Morrison was accused of indecent exposure and inciting a riot during the chaotic set. He was subsequently convicted of indecent exposure and open profanity, marking a major turning point in his career and the band's public standing.
I'm gonna love you till the stars fall from.
Morrison died in Paris in 1971 while the case was still in the appeals process. And it wasn't until 2010 that the governor of Florida issued a posthumous pardon, citing the conflicting and unreliable witness testimony from that night. The Who, The Holiday Inn Explosion. The Who were famous for smashing their instruments, and their great music too, but drummer Keith Moon took destruction to an entirely new level. He was basically a human wrecking ball, and in 1967, the band was in Flint, Michigan. It was Keith's 21st birthday. Most people celebrate with a cake, maybe a bottle of booze, but Keith decided to celebrate by allegedly detonating a high-powered cherry bomb in his hotel room's toilet. Many kids from the 70s would be thrilled. Unfortunately, the blast was so strong, it completely destroyed the plumbing and sent shards of porcelain flying everywhere. It sparked a giant food fight that turned into a full-blown riot in the hotel, and while the story that he was banned for life from every Holiday Inn is a bit of a stretch, he was definitely banned from that specific hotel and the entire city of Flint. Yep, it is still one of the most famous stories of 1960s rockstar chaos ever told. Mötley Crüe, the Vince Neil Fatality. In 1984, Mötley Crüe was the definitive face of the burgeoning hair metal scene in LA, known for a lifestyle of extreme indulgence that matched their flamboyant stage presence. However, this culture of recklessness led to a genuine tragedy on the night of December 8th. Frontman Vince Neil, while driving under the influence, was involved in a head-on collision that would have devastating consequences. The crash resulted in the death of Nicholas Razzle Dingley, the drummer for the band Hanoi Rocks. And it also left 2 occupants of another vehicle with permanent brain damage. Neil was subsequently convicted of vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence. The case remains a significant point of controversy in music history, as Neil served only 20 days in jail, a sentence that many critics felt didn't reflect the gravity of the loss and injuries sustained. Frankie Goes to Hollywood's BBC ban. If you grew up in the 80s, you definitely remember the Frankie Say Relax t-shirts that were everywhere. The band was a massive pop sensation, but they owe a huge part of their success to a mistake made by the BBC. When their song Relax came out, the lyrics and the music video were a bit too much for the conservative broadcasters of the time. And a BBC DJ actually stopped the record mid-play because he found the content offensive. And then the network officially banned the song from the airwaves.
When you wanna come, when you wanna come.
But in the ultimate example of the forbidden fruit, the band made everyone want to hear it even more. The song shot straight to #1 and stayed there for weeks, becoming one of the best-selling singles of the entire decade simply because the authorities told people they couldn't listen to it. The Clash, the Strummer disappearance.
Gypsies on the pavement, now the news has left to attention, lunar landing of the Venice Convention.
The Clash, often referred to as the only band that matters, were the intellectual and political leaders of the British punk movement. By 1982, they had achieved significant commercial success with combat rock, but the internal pressure of maintaining their ideological integrity while becoming global stars was causing the band to fracture. This all culminated in a bizarre event just weeks before a major tour. Frontman Joe Strummer suddenly vanished, leaving the band and their management in a state of panic.
Got to let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
His disappearance sparked a massive nationwide search by the British press, with rumors circulating that he had quit music or he was met with foul play. While in reality, Strummer had fled to Paris to clear his head and live anonymously, eventually being discovered where else? Drinking in a bar. The incident forced the band to cancel several shows and signaled the beginning of the end for the group's classic lineup. The Rolling Stones, the Redlands drug bust. The Rolling Stones were always the bad boys compared to the clean-cut image of the early Beatles. By 1967, the British authorities were looking for any reason to take them down a notch. Acting on a tip-off from a tabloid newspaper nonetheless, the police raided Keith Richards' country estate, known as Redlands, while a party was in full swing. The scene they found was legendary. Various substances were scattered around. And singer Marianne Faithfull was famously found wearing nothing but a fur rug. Both Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were arrested and given surprisingly harsh prison sentences. The news caused a massive public outcry across the UK, with even conservative newspapers arguing that the punishment was far too severe. The sentences were eventually overturned on appeal, but the bust turned the Stones into counterculture heroes overnight. The Beatles, the Jesus controversy. In 1966, the Beatles were experiencing a level of global fame that was entirely unprecedented in human history. They were more than a band. They were a cultural phenomenon that seemed untouchable. However, an offhand remark by John Lennon during an interview with a British journalist, well, it would lead to the most significant crisis of their career. Lennon observed that Christianity will vanish and noted that the band was more popular than Jesus now. While the comment was largely ignored in the UK, its publication in the United States months later ignited a firestorm of controversy. Particularly in the Southern Bible Belt. It led to organized public burnings of Beatles records, death threats, and a pervasive atmosphere of hostility during their final American tour. There was even a game of telephone where the quote got messed up to say the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. Anyhow, the intense backlash and fear for their safety were primary factors in the band's decision to permanently retire from live performances later that year. The Milli Vanilli fraud. At the end of the 80s, Milli Vanilli were the absolute kings of pop. They had the looks, the moves, and hits like Girl You Know It's True. I mean, that was playing on loop everywhere. They even won the Grammy for Best New Artist. Seriously, they were on the up and up. But the whole thing came crashing down during an MTV performance in Bristol, Connecticut, when the backing track started to skip on the word girl. Well, the duo panicked and ran off stage, and the truth finally came out. Milli Vanilli hadn't sung a single note on their entire album. The singers were actually just models hired to be the face of music. It was the biggest fraud in the history of the music business. They were actually forced to give back their Grammy, which is still the only time that's ever happened. And they went from being the biggest stars in the world to a total punchline in less than 24 hours. And there you have them. These weren't just wild rumors or backstage whispers. These were the moments when rock music crashed straight through the evening news and into everyday conversation, proving that bands could shake culture just as hard as they shook arenas. Now, we need to know which one hit you the hardest back then, or which story still makes you shake your head and say, I remember when that broke. Did I forget a wild story from rock music lore? Well, please get down in the comment section and add it. I could always make a round two. Man, this was a wild ride. I sure hope you enjoyed it. I did. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that little thumbs up icon. It really helps our channel a ton. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a show. But most importantly, from my entire team here at Do You Remember, I'm Nostalgic Nick, and until next time, keep the volume up, keep the myths honest, or at least awesome, and remember, sometimes the biggest noise in rock history wasn't the music at all.